There seems to be something innately alluring about venturing off the beaten path. This often raw and natural human curiosity tends to lead us traveling down that path until we eventually reach an end. For some, an old dirt road may be a passage to home, and for others, a gateway to something more sinister. Here are 3 experiences, all shared while traversing down one of these many roads. A few years back now, a couple friends and I found ourselves driving home from our annual summer weekend camping trip. These yearly trips have given us some of our fondest moments and memories we're sure to never forget. Luckily, the trip itself went off without a hitch. It was the drive home from this particular trip that unfortunately gave us a terror we're sure to remember. After about 6 long hours on the road, home was just now a short ways away. Couldn't have been more than 20 minutes left. We'd been driving this last stretch through the dark, about an hour and a half, already exhausted, and we're just ready to get home and get some sleep. The last stop we had was dropping my friend off at his parents' house, who lived about 10 miles from the city, a bit out into the country. Since we were coming from the opposite direction we'd usually take to get there, we'd be relying on Google Maps to guide us down some dimly lit dirt roads to return. Driving in a bit of a daze, my phone alerted me that I had completely missed our turn, and the next closest suggested road wouldn't be for miles. I continued forward for a while before brushing it off and turning down the next dirt road I saw to return to the original course. Because I couldn't just whip a whole turn on this tiny road, I had to drive until there was somewhere I could pull in and get completely turned back around. I pulled into an unlit driveway that was quickly illuminated by the headlights of my car. This property looked to be a huge, newly built estate, complete with a massive front yard and winding fence guarding it. We all kind of just sat and marveled at this place for a second before our hearts sank. "Do you guys see that?" my friend muttered. Barely in view, off in a corner window of this place, was a figure peering into the house. I slowly turned my head back, hoping we could just reverse out and get the hell out of there. When I turned back around, everyone in the car froze completely at the sight in front of us. The figure appeared about half the distance closer than what it was before, now looking back at us. Now fully visible in the car's headlights, we could make out a middle-aged man in a tattered navy blue sweater and jeans. His hair and clothes were disheveled, as if he had been rolling around in the dirt or something. His eyes staring blankly back into the headlights of the car, and in his right hand, an object reflecting the bright headlights' glow. It was a knife. We all collectively felt the same blank dread. It was like the type of dream where you're unable to move or scream even when your life depends on it. Then, finally, a move that shattered the stillness of that moment. The man, about 50 feet away and still fixated on us, took a small step forward, and then another, before flat out bolting toward us. Whatever spell was holding us still and mute instantly broke as we all looked back and floored it in reverse. I backed into that main dirt road and put the pedal to the floor. My friend looked back and could still see the man in pursuit before fading away into the dead of night. Soon after, we found ourselves on the main road that would ensure our safety. In the brief time left driving to our friend's parents', we all struggled to question what exactly we just saw. Who the hell was that man? And why was he spying on a seemingly empty property? Why was he covered in dirt? Why was he armed with the knife? Was he waiting for someone like us to come along and notice him? None of us ended up getting the sleep we raced home for that night. I had just gotten off a shift at work and planned to meet up with some buddies to kick off the weekend with a night of partying. I live in a pretty small town, so you could call where I go into work the city, and where I live more of the country. Anyway, as soon as that clock struck 9 p.m., I was ready to hurry home and find out what the night had in store. There was only the usual 15-minute drive keeping me between work and home now. My typical drive kept me just a little longer, dealing with stops or traffic in the city. Occasionally, I'd take a shortcut through the country that saved me some time whenever I would be running late. Eager to get home quickly, I figured why not try that route tonight. I was about halfway home on this couple-mile stretch of unlit dirt road, going a little faster than I should have been, when I spotted something far into the distance. I slammed on the brake, causing the car to come to a screeching halt and my body to lunge forward from the sudden stop. As I looked up to see what I'd avoided hitting in the road, I felt chills surging through my body. There was this huge deer just standing in the road. Deer, or any animal for that matter, weren't uncommon in the area, but this one was different. This steer had a massive gash in its back, leaving some of its tissue and muscle visibly exposed. Blood slowly ran out of its wounds, down onto the dirt below. The poor thing was looking around frantically in shock and dragging its limping legs to cross the road as if it were being hunted. Just seeing this filled me with such a sense of unexplainable uneasiness and helplessness. Then, suddenly, the deer collapsed right before the car. I looked down and watched the animal draw its last breaths when something dawned on me. It had fallen in such a way that it was blocking the majority of this tiny dirt road. I couldn't find a way to go around it without ending up in a ditch. My body fell numb when I exited the car. It was black outside, all aside from the light coming from my headlights, and eerily quiet. Whatever had attacked this deer was still out there somewhere, but I had to move it just a foot or two to continue down the road. I grabbed the hind legs and began pulling for any inch I could. This thing must have weighed about 200 pounds. And then there was that sound. That horrible, haunting sound. My body completely froze with fear when I heard the noises coming from the distant woods. A deep, almost distorted howling, like nothing I'd ever heard before. And that was it. I didn't care if I had to go over this thing. It was time to get the hell out of there. I sprinted back to my car, and luckily, there was now just enough room to squeeze by. I sat driving silently, staring straight ahead, every breath getting deeper than the last for those few miles home. Safe to say, I didn't end up leaving again that night. My mother and I have a funny history of ending up in some strange situations together. Fortunately for us, we're able to look back and laugh at a majority of them. There are, of course, the rare handful that are not so enjoyable. This was one of those times. When I was about 15, my mom had taken us out to some old back roads to get me experience driving a car. This provided a little more room for me to make mistakes and learn, since there was rarely anyone else driving all the way out here. After a bit, she had asked me to pull over near this open cornfield and wait for her. She had told me she was going to grab some of these stalks of corn for fall decoration, and assured me that no one would even know or care that they were gone. And yeah, we both agreed that what she was doing wasn't necessarily right. But who would really mind a few missing stalks of corn among the hundreds of others there, right? It turns out that we were wrong. My mom put the 5 or so stalks she picked in the back of our car when she noticed something tearing down the dirt road in our direction. A junked, white pickup truck came barreling toward us at high speed. Once in view of us, the driver leaned out, screaming incoherently, while my mom ran back up to the passenger seat. "We need to leave. Drive," she said, now breathing heavily. We both looked ahead, noticing the white truck getting ready to turn around after us. It was now up to 15-year-old, unlicensed me to outrun this lunatic that planned on doing who knows what when he finally caught us. After about a mile of him tailing us closer and closer, my mom urged me to pull down a small road we came upon, and that she would do her best to explain herself. She realized now that she was in the wrong, and hopefully he would understand. We finally came to a stop at the end of this road, near some people we noticed working nearby. I watched the man angrily walk out, slam the door of the truck, and proceed to walk toward me in the driver's side before my mother intercepted him. I wouldn't know exactly what was said until after we got home, and my mother told me everything. She said the man had an awfully gritty and unkempt appearance. His terrible hygiene made it seem as if he hadn't bathed in weeks. He began tearing into my mother about how she would be going to jail for stealing, and claimed she had taken much more than just stalks of corn. My mother repeatedly tried to calm the man down, offering him money for whatever she had taken. The man demanded she pay him $400 and became more and more threatening when she told him that that just wasn't possible. It became obvious to her that the man was in an aggressively drunken haze and far beyond reason. She eventually broke down when the man mentioned that he had something waiting for her in his truck. Thankfully, one of the men mentioned earlier, a construction worker from a building nearby, intervened when he heard my mother crying and the man shouting becoming louder. The worker threatened to get the police involved after he'd gotten within smelling distance of the man. This caused the man to drop the argument completely, retreat back to his truck, and drive off without a second thought. It turns out, the drunk man lived somewhere nearby that cornfield and would regularly antagonize anyone walking around the premises. This apparently wasn't his first run-in with the men stationed on the road, and he knew better than to stick around too long. I don't even know what would have happened if those guys weren't there to bail us out, but my mother was reminded of a very valuable lesson that day. Keep your hands off other people's stuff.